All right, I'm going to call to order this special city council meeting for December 11th, 2024. Please call the roll.
Present.
Here.
Here.
Here. All right, first item of business here, the only item of business, item 2.1, consideration of and direction to staff regarding options to fill a vacancy on the city council. Staff report by Christina Franco.
Good afternoon. I do have a PowerPoint presentation this evening.
To fill a vacancy on the city council. Staff report by Christina Franco.
Good afternoon. I do have a PowerPoint presentation this evening. All right, let's try that again.
All right.
Okay, so this evening we're going to discuss the vacancy in District 2. Councilmember Armstrong was elected at large in November of 22, or I'm sorry, by District 2 in 2022 with the term expiring in 2026. Councilmember Armstrong was successful in this last election for the seat at mayor, creating a vacancy in District 2 with the expiration still expiring of 2026. Per our municipal code, it does speak to filling a vacancy on the city council that was created. The vacancy must be filled within 30 days of the vacancy, which commenced yesterday at the swearing in. The vacancy can either be filled by appointment or called by a special election. And the remainder of the term, the person who fills the vacancy will fill for the unexpired term. So the two different options, again, is by appointment. You do have to fill the vacancy by appointment within 30 days. Just considerations for this option, it is faster. The appointment can be made immediately after the process. The cost, the cost is very minimal with the appointment. And then chances of tie votes during council meetings significantly reduced. And that's explained more for option 2. So option 2 would be a special election. This is where the council would call for a special election no less than 114 days. The next regular established for mail-in would be May 6th. If polling locations would be an option for council, it wouldn't be until November 4th of 2025. Some considerations for this item would be that the council seat would remain vacant for 6+ months, leaving District 2 unrepresented during that time. A 4-council person during the vacancy could result in tie votes, or if there's any proposed changes to the general plan, which would require 4/5 vote, that could also cause an issue. The cost for a special election, it ranges between $11 to $14.50 per registered voter. There's about 14,000 registered voters within District 2. So depending on the type of election, if it was decided, it could range anywhere between $159,000 to just over $210,000 for that vacancy. For the process of appointment, staff has come up with a recommended process. If you were to choose appointment, this process can be adjusted, amended, or completely scrapped and you start all over. So the recommended process, it would be starting tomorrow, so day really 3 through 24 we would issue a notice of vacancy. We would invite eligible residents to apply for the position. We would post everything on social media through our eGov email, as well as press release would go out. This was something that we did when we filled the vacancy in 2020, is that we did request applicants to complete a 400-word candidate statement, just as a candidate would do when they are running for office. And that's something that you could change or not. Once the application period closes, we would hold a special meeting where you would receive public comment, review all of the applications that were received and were eligible to serve on the city council. And at that time, the council would select up to 8 candidates to be selected and invited for a formal interview before the city council at a special meeting. And you could always interview more than 8 or less than 8. 8 was just a number we came up with to keep it within range for about 45 minutes would be about 6 hours of interviews. And then after those candidates are invited for a formal interview, we would hold another special city council meeting where you would conduct the formal interviews and you would select a candidate and make an appointment at that time. So option 2, which would be the election process, it would be similar to any other election. The city council would need to meet on December 24th to call that special election. We would coordinate with the county. We would establish a word count. They would pull papers with me. Qualified candidates would be listed on the ballot. Ballots would be mailed to registered voters. We would have an election day. The election would need to be certified 30 days after that. And then we would swear in the new council member. So if the election was in May, someone would not be seated until June. So this evening, we're asking for council discussion to decide between the appointment versus the election. And based on what you decide, there are just a few questions we would need direction on. If it is appointment, would you want to do individual interviews or candidate forum style where all candidates would be in a room and they kind of round robin questions? They would get 2 to 3 minutes per question. Or individual interviews would be, 30 to 45 minutes per interview with only one candidate in the room at a time. And just confirm the special meeting dates for the application review and interviews. That way, when we post everything to social media, we would have those dates so candidates would be able to know when to prepare for. And then you would conduct the interviews and make an appointment. If it is an election, staff would bring back a resolution and a staff report before you on December 24th to call that special election. And that is my report. If you have any questions that I could answer, I'd be
All
happy
right,
to.
let's take questions. Who'd like to start?
Questions or comments?
No, let's go with questions first, and then we'll
Okay.
do public comments and then get into the discussion on it. But any questions? I mean, I've got a question. Why December 24th?
Because the 30 days is the first part. It has to be called, the decision has to be made to fill the vacancy within 30 days per municipal code. Also with the county, if we consolidate, if we go past January 13th, the next election would not be held until November 5th or November 2025. So the decision has to be made before January 13th in order to do so. And to call election, you have to do it at a regular scheduled meeting.
Well, I get that in terms of, not beyond a certain date, but why not prior to the 24th? It's a special meeting. Why couldn't we call a special meeting earlier if we were to go that route?
When you call for an election, it has to be done at a regular meeting, not a special meeting.
At a regular meeting, okay.
And so the
I
next
missed that.
regular meeting would be the December 24th date.
Oh.
Okay, thank
And
you.
also, as a point of clarification, the council already officially canceled that meeting. So I don't know if we would need to call a special meeting to reschedule that meeting, just to make sure. I know this is a bureaucratic mess, but that meeting has been canceled. So I don't know if we would need to agendize calling that meeting and hold a special meeting to reschedule it. I'd have to confer with legal and the city clerk.
Okay, all right, well, we'll see if we get to that point. I guess I did have another question. Did you have a question? I thought.
Oh, I do, but go ahead, Mr.
Well, go ahead, go with yours.
The question I have regarding appointment versus election is, sorry, the individual interview versus candidate forum, is it in one or the other? Or can it be, I guess if we have a candidate forum, we select from the forum and we make a
Yes.
decision
Yes,
instead of doing an individual interview?
correct.
Okay, you can't do both.
You could and
You
hold
could.
two different meeting dates.
Okay,
I mean,
Okay.
that would be the council's discretion.
okay,
If you want to do one or both.
okay. Thank you.
So my other question was, what kind of history do we have with respect to special elections for council members and with respect to appointments for council members?
In the history of San Ramon, we've had 4 vacancies occur within the 40 years. And to fill those vacancies have all been done by appointment. We have not held a special election to fill the vacancies.
And the reason for those appointments, I know the reason for me, I mean, that's because Mayor Hudson was elected as mayor and it created a vacancy in District 2. What about the other 3?
The other 3 were in 1991, 99, and 2003, and they were due to resignations of council members.
Okay.
So they vacated their seat before their term expired.
Other questions? Okay.
No,
questions.
it seems pretty
Well,
straightforward.
Yeah, I'm pretty straightforward in terms of 2 options, although there are some
Yeah.
some questions that we need to answer depending upon which route we go. But if there's no other questions, then I'd like to open up for public comment. And I saw you got some speaker cards, so let's go ahead with the in the room speakers.
Greg Carr.
Greg Carr, San Juan resident. This is an interesting thing. I can go back to before I was on the council. There was a guy who was on the council and he did something untoward and had to go. And I think that was prior to 91. Anyway, and he came in for 2 years. He was appointed. And then at the end of the 2-year appointment, there were 4 seats open at that time. 3 for the 3 of the 5 were open, and the seat that he had vacated. And it's an interesting thing to do that. I would suggest to you that you appoint. We can't afford 150,000, 200,000. That's just, to me, that's off the table, no matter how much we might want to. And what I propose is that you appoint a person who does not plan to run again. Because if you appoint that person and that person then plans to run again, there is an uneven play field. Okay. That's not to put the finger on you, Mark. It's just objectively looking at this. Okay. And there are people who would probably be willing to do that in District 2. I can think of one former council member. And then have them promise that they will not run again. They're only providing 2 years of their time to fill in so that the play field's even. I would suggest you do that. In terms of talking to them, I think the idea of having a open forum is a real good idea because you get to see how people interact. And interaction, of course, is a key thing to who you choose. So I would urge you to do that, okay? But don't put somebody in who is not going to give you a promissory note to not run again, because that puts anyone who 2 years down the stream wants to run, who is not the appointee, that puts them at a little disadvantage, assuming that you're going to get anybody to volunteer to run for the office. We don't have a lot of people coming out of the woodwork here to do that. So anyway, I urge you, the 4 of you, to consider that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Susie Ferris Inderkum.
Evening, Mayor, council members. And it's nice that we get an opportunity to express a slightly different opinion. I'm not fond of the past appointments, direct appointments. I'm very pleased to see the concept being offered by staff of a lottery to fill the vacancy for that extension. So I think that's good. But if a special election and the cost of a special election is a sticking point, then I'd like to suggest that the council take under consideration a third option, and that is that in the future, should council members decide to run for a higher office, they have to resign their position and open it up, and therefore that position would be part of the normal ballot process as well. Because I think if you're thinking to move on, it saves everybody a lot of time. Open that seat up permanently and let somebody else that wants to be in there come into it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Susie. Next speaker.
Dinesh Govindarao.
Hey, how you doing? Thanks, Dinesh Govindarao, and first I want to congratulate Mayor Armstrong, Councilmember Veros, and Councilmember Juvenat for your newly elected positions. Well, thanks again for giving me the time today. So I heard, there's the two options, and there are some previous speakers that spoke about some other options. And, my recommendation would be, I'd like you to also consider something that I feel would optimize the first two options that the city clerk had mentioned, but is to look at when you appoint someone from District 2 or someone maybe consider at large, limit that to 2 years. With the agreement that they would, and if they wanted to run again, they could, but they could at least have them sit out that next election. So the reason I say that is we all know, and again, this is nothing against anyone. It's also myself as well. I'm probably, and part of this, but when you have an incumbent, it's always hard for another candidate to succeed in an election cycle. And Mayor Armstrong, I know you were appointed in 2020 and ran in as an incumbent in 2022. When you were appointed, when your appointment term came to an end, you won again in 2022. And so when you ran for re-election, Councilmember Veros, I know you also ran and opposed in 2024. And the general feeling is that people don't want to run against an incumbent, just in our town. And I have a similar experience where I was appointed for the DSRSD director for a 2-year term back in 2022, and then got reelected for another term in 2024, and also ran unopposed. So I think it's fair to say, by being appointed and then assuming the role as an incumbent, or being an incumbent, influence kind of these outcomes for all of us in 2022 election and 2024 election. So I don't ever think there's ever been an incumbent that's lost in San Ramon, Danville, or Dublin, when these other candidates were not council members. I can't think of anything. Maybe there has been. But so I would strongly encourage that the council take this approach that I mentioned to make it most equitable for all involved. It would ensure that we are being also fiscally responsible, so we don't go that other path of trying to have an election, and we would be doing the right thing for our constituents. This would also give us a level playing field for everyone, and for any future candidates who want to run in the next election cycle. So thank you again for giving me the time today. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Shirag Kathrani.
First of all, congratulations, Mayor Armstrong. Congratulations, Robert and Sridhar, for being on the council again. Sridhar and Robert for being on the council for the first time. My opinion is I'm kind of mixed opinion. I believe so. Election is a good process because when we do the election, community gets far more engaged because people go out and talk to. We have a community which is a kind of disengaged. We are not seeing so many people running. And if people can apply, then they can definitely go for election as well. Again, the cost is a considering factor. But one more factor I definitely believe is I don't agree to what Greg said, that the council, whoever is appointed has to be promissory note. They don't run for the same role. They can run for mayor, basically. If you run for a council, if you are appointed, just don't run for the same role, because that gives an unusual advantage. So we should have a promissory note or some kind of way to handle that situation. I hope you take that consideration. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, next speaker.
That was the last speaker card, but you did receive 2 written comments from Serve J Nest and V Lamb West. And that's before you as well as in the back of the room.
Okay, all right, we've got those in our packet. Thank you. All right, if there's no other public comment, I will close public comment and open it up to the council for any other further clarifying questions or comments.
Yeah, is it okay
Oh.
if I ask a question really quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
Your statement made me think about it. So when someone is appointed, this is for the clerk, of course, when someone's appointed, if they decide to run again, like for their seat that they were appointed to, do they get to use their title?
Yes.
Okay.
They would use appointed council member.
Right. Because I'm just thinking that might be something that perhaps could be a consideration, changing,
Yeah.
you know? Okay, that was it. Thank you.
All right. Well, I think, Councilmember Rose, you're the only one up here who's been through this decision process before.
Yeah.
I have been through it on the other end of it, so I have experience in being a candidate, for the appointment process that was selected at that time, but I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Sure. Thanks, Mayor Armstrong. This is definitely like a deja vu for me after 4 years, right? So the similar situation that we are in after 4 years. And I was like in Robert's shoes. At that time, I was fresh council member with all stalwart council members we had. But thanks for sharing your feedback. I really appreciate that you're coming here during the weekday evening and sharing your thoughts. We appreciate it. So my thought process when we did this in the last time, right? So the first thing is about whether we should go with election process or appointment. The reason we picked in the direction of appointment is to be fiscally responsible. That's one piece. The second piece is definitely we didn't want to run our council for a long time without a tying vote, because any important decisions that comes up, especially our budgets are going to be coming up, and a lot of these decisions that we need to make within that next 6 months, it requires that we don't want to get into a situation of tie vote, right? So if we are tied up, then it will be a problem. And a lot of those decisions had to wait until we get the 5th council member join us. So to avoid that situation, that's the second key element, right? That's one. And the third thing is community or residents trusted us. That's the reason we are here today, right? And especially mayor, you are at large, got elected. So community trusted you to make decisions on behalf of them. So there's another point that we took at that in our rational thought process of why we should go for appointment and what residents believed in us and why they sent us here to make those decisions, right? So based on those things, we went with appointment rather than going for the special election. Now, coming to the next point is, I heard about, we did have that similar feedback where the person who is going to be appointed, that person can get advantage for the future election, right? So, but then if someone who's serving us for 2 years, why that person should become a disadvantaged situation for that person by making, all kind of conditions around it, right? So if a person served 2 years, let's say once a person appointed and served for 2 years, then let the residents take the choice whether they want to continue that person or not. Still, that person need to go in front of residents, voters, to approve, right? It's not like just because you're appointed doesn't mean that the residents will just approve you. But then I understand that there is a concern that, there is incumbent, there is a lot of challenges to beat incumbent. But if incumbent didn't do right job, for which we appoint that person, obviously the citizens can reject that person, right? So we will leave it up to the voters or residents to make that decision, rather than us making that person a disadvantaged situation by putting all kind of restrictions around him or her, right? So that's another thought process that we used and led that person to continue to run for future election. Okay, so that's one of the reason. And then also on the forum, at that time we did it Zoom because of the COVID situation, right? So we got everyone on the Zoom call, and then we did a candidate forum thing. But then there is advantage and disadvantage in that one, because when, let's say if there are 8 people, and if you ask a question, we are asking a question, we need to either keep changing the first option for each candidate, right? So let's say if 8 candidates, then we need to have 8 unique questions so that each candidate will get one question, unique question, so that the other candidate cannot prepare ready. So that's one of the reasons that we do all our commission appointments, that we do individually interviews, so that everybody get the same questions and same sequence, and we get the feedback from them with the same quality, right? So the first person who's getting the question should not become disadvantaged. The last person will be definitely much more prepared, right? So that's why we do that kind of prefer that kind of interview process during our commission interviews and many other committee meetings. So based on this one, so just to put overall, the first one, the candidate that for the election process or for appointment, we went with appointment. And within that appointment, we didn't put any restrictions to that candidate, because we don't want that candidate to be in a disadvantaged situation because that person volunteered to serve our community for 2 years. And one more important thing is 2 years of knowledge is very important on this council. We don't want to lose just saying that, oh, you have we cannot punish the person that you have 2 years worth of knowledge. Now we don't want you to be part of this council. So that should not be part of our decision making, right? So that's the reason we wanted to make sure that we give the same advantage or disadvantage, whatever the reasons that we can think of, but then let the residents decide that after 2 years. So with that in idea, we wanted to go with appointment with a candidate without any restrictions. But at that time, because of the COVID, it is a candidate forum. But in this case, I would prefer with the individual interviews. And then rank choice. What we did at that time is a rank choice. All the council members independently ranked, and based on the tally, the person who got the highest rank got selected. And that was you at that time. So I just wanted to share what we did at that time with you guys.
Okay, I appreciate it. Yeah, and I have personal perspective going through that, and I can share some of that, but I'd like to hear other thoughts. Robert?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the public comment. I have 2 questions. Maybe Stephen or somebody can answer. At what point, I know there's another option, which is probably not the most popular one, which is to go to the governor and ask them to appoint somebody. Is that a possibility? Can that ever happen if we don't make a selection?
That is not something that I could answer this evening.
Okay.
I think the governor option automatically kicks in if the council fails to select either of the two.
Okay.
And then it instantly defaults to the governor, if I have that correct.
Okay. And then my next question is with regards to making decisions for committee members in general, like for the planning commission. How is that typically done? In the same fashion, we would select a council member here. We would conduct an interview and.
Correct. We would invite those to apply for the position. We would hold interviews. It's typically in front of all 5 council members. The council interviews all of the applicants.
Mhm.
And then based on discussion and voting, they select or appoint a candidate to the commissions.
I see.
Very similar.
I see.
The one difference is that the commission interviews are typically not live streamed as a regular council meeting, yes, I'm remembering that correctly. So it's in more of a conference room setting with the individual commissioners, and that's common across most cities. However, when you do interview for council candidates, they are typically streamed live like a normal council meeting, so everybody can view the proceedings.
Okay. Thank you.
I actually, I went through this process myself. We selected somebody for the water district when I was there, and we did exactly an appointment, same thing for same reason, very expensive. One of the things though that caught my attention that I personally was not a huge fan of was kind of the big showy names putting out endorsements to like, oh, I recommend you pick this person or pick that person. The reason being is because I believe that this process should be as sanitized and unbiased as possible. We want to pick a person because they are the best candidate. They bring the best skills and experience to the seat. I don't really care who their connections are. And I really don't think that that's something that should be factored in, frankly. So with that said, I also, like I said, if there's a way that we can talk about maybe possibly not allowing someone who's been appointed to use the title of incumbency in any way, I think that would also be an additional step to sort of remove bias, in a future election. But otherwise, in terms of cost and practicality, I mean, we just got Measure N passed. I would hate to see us spend upwards of $210,000 for an election, not to mention, as was mentioned, we could find ourselves in a predicament where we have ties. Who's going to break that tie now? We could end up in situations where decisions are going to be protracted for a very long time, and that is not good for the city at the end of the day. I do agree that I think individual interviews are best, again, for the same reason, to not create an unfair advantage that if or disadvantage of the person going first and then the second, third just repeats what they said or makes some modification, has more time to think about it. That's not very equitable to me. So individual interviews, I agree, is the best. Stick with the same questions so that we're not, creating a bias inherently in there. And I do agree ranked choice is a great way to really just get sort of a broad feel first and narrow it down to what the council thinks would be who would be the best person to serve and fill that vacancy for the 2-year term. Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, by the way, so in that comment that I made about the endorsements, is it possible to say, hey, you can apply, but we don't want this to be part of the process?
Hi. I can't think of any legal way that you can restrict it, somebody who was appointed to say that they won't, contractually or otherwise verbally agree to not run again. That'd be their personal choice, but you can't, I think, put those conditions on them to just that's why, that would be a condition of why you'd appoint them. They have the freedom to run again as part of.
Oh, that wasn't my question, though. That was a statement that was made earlier. Somebody mentioned that we could, selecting somebody who didn't make that choice. But my question wasn't about them running again or not. It was 2 questions I asked earlier that I didn't quite get an answer to. One of them is if the person we select, is there a way that if a person we select, can we update our process where, as was mentioned, they can still use appointed council member, City of San Ramon, if they choose to run in 2026, right? Is there a way that we can change that such that we don't allow that to be used so that there's no unfair advantage in a future election? And then the second question is, can we change in the process people's, to submit endorsements as part of their application by other people?
So I can answer in regards to using the title, your ballot title, appointed incumbent or appointed council member. That's governed by the election code. So I would have to confer with the city attorney's office and do some research as to see what the city could put as a parameter using that, because that's governed by the state, and what a candidate can and can't use as their ballot statement. But that's not to say that they couldn't use those words in their candidate statement. So
Right.
even though we say you can't use it on the ballot, you could use it in other forms. So that would be a discussion too, is, okay, well, you can't use it as a ballot, but you could use it in your candidate statement. And we don't have restrictions, and that's also governed by the government code of what you can and cannot use in your candidate statement as well. And then the second piece of the endorsements, as part of the application process, it would be similar to the last time. It would be the general application. You can ask for a candidate statement. You could say no endorsements within those, but from what I recall the last time, I don't think there was any endorsements in those candidate statements. It's more about,
The
you know, their
substance.
resume, what they bring
Yeah.
to the table, you know, what, why they would be a good candidate for this position. But because it's an appointment, I don't see, and Alicia, if you know, you couldn't put the endorsement in that candidate statement because this is just by an appointment, not by an election.
Right.
So-
And the thing is, you know, I've seen this happen in other spaces, right, of appointments. I know I've had, you know, we had that situation when we had to do that at the water district, but I know it happened in another water district recently, and, you know, where they had to do appointment, and they do, some people will do that. I just think that if we want to, can we just sort of, is there any way that we can just make sure that that's just not part of our process?
Well, I think, you know, people can write whatever they want in their candidate statement. We could, if the council chooses, we could put something out that the council prefers no endorsements. That definitely wouldn't restrict somebody from doing it, but it would reflect very poorly on an application if a council said, please don't do something, and then you do it. The other area where I think that might come into play is any public comment period. There is nothing that a candidate could do to, even if they say, please don't endorse me, you could theoretically have somebody on their own volition come up to the podium and say, hey, this is a great person, please. And that puts that particular candidate in an awkward spot. Do you know if they coordinated? Did they not coordinate? So you just kind of, you know, you have to roll with what comes in. But if it is under the, you know, if it's directed by the council this evening, we could put some type of statement in the application process that the council would prefer no endorsements during this process. We can, you know, say in general to the process if that's something that the council's interested in. But again, I don't know. There's nothing legally that we can do to say you are now disqualified because you put that in there. It's a
I wouldn't
preference.
disqualify them.
Right,
but-
right. No.
But I think
Make it
I
a
would, yeah.
requirement, not
You know,
to.
it's just like when we talk about money, you know, we've talked about the candidate statement and how many words we allow, and, you know, how the candidate statement is so important for people who don't have the funds to reach every voter. And so when we talk about equity and making sure that we're fair and equitable and balanced in our decision-making process, it is important to, you know, sort of neutralize some of those extraneous factors that happen. But I certainly do understand in hindsight of what you're saying, in light of what you're saying,
Sure.
how that could be very tricky, because you're absolutely right. Somebody could come up to the podium and still, you know, make a comment.
Yep.
So thank
And
you.
I would offer as well is, this is, if appointment is the process that's decided, it's a very fast moving process. You know, we will have the application period essentially open for about 2.5 weeks. Those applications remain confidential. And then 2 days later, there's a special meeting. And then 2 days later, there's an appointment. So it's a very quick, it happens within a week. So as far as electioning or anything campaigning doesn't really exist in this process
Mhm.
because it's so fast paced.
Okay.
So as far as endorsements goes, that's just something else to consider.
Yeah. Okay, good, good. Thank you.
Robert, you look like you want to say something.
Yeah, I have a question,
Mayor.
Regarding the screening process for the applications, is there a limit to how many can come in? Like, we limit it to 30 applications, 100 applications?
We don't limit the applications. The only thing is once the application period closes, I do verify that they live within the
Yeah.
District 2
Mhm.
and that they're registered voters of that district.
Okay.
But otherwise, we did not put one on the last process, but that's not to say that you couldn't on this process.
Understood. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, I think the most important thing we got to nail down first is, are we going to do an appointment or are we going to do a special election? And we've heard from the public here kind of different perspectives on this, as well as some alternatives and some twist to it. I'll just tell you from my perspective, looking at the two different options, I agree. I think cost is a factor here. We had so much of a challenge going through the budgeting process last year and spending cuts and everything else to the point where we put a measure on the ballot. That's not everything for us, but that'll be helpful. But that doesn't mean we can just start doing things and spending money that we wouldn't normally have. So I am concerned about the cost, a couple $100,000, as well as the timing. And the timing, we've talked about tie votes and things like that, but okay, that might apply to some important land use projects that we might have coming before us. And, who knows when Chevron Park might be coming or other projects or general plan changes. We've got the zoning ordinance change coming soon. There's plenty of decision things that we have to do. So voting is important, and we don't want to be in a position where we might have a tie. But also I look at just where we are in terms of our annual cycle. And we've got a goal setting session coming up. Based on that goal setting session, we're starting our budgeting process. We've got the whole budget cycle to go through. We need a full council, in my opinion, to go through that whole goal setting and budget cycle and make the important decisions that are going to kind of guide us for the next year and really into the next 5 years as some of the things we're going to be talking about. So I think it's important that we make a decision sooner rather than later. And I think deferring until May, worst case, November, as you said, I think I think that's too long a period. I think we need to fill the vacancy as soon as we can, given the timeline, given the holiday season, given our canceled meeting, given the 30-day requirement that we've got to get this done. If we go the appointment route, then I say we kind of get on with it, and that would be my recommendation. And unless there's any further discussion, I'd like to kind of get that out of the way first. Do we want to go special election or do we want to go appointment? You've all kind of weighed in. I'm hearing there's a leaning towards one direction, but I'd like to kind of solidify that in a motion before we get moving
Yeah.
with the appointment process.
Yeah, I'm happy to move for us to do an appointment for the vacancy for District 2.
I second that.
Okay. Are we going to do this? Any
Do
more
please,
discussion
Becky.
on that?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, she put it up there. I guess we're going to do it electronically. We've got a mover by Councilmember Rubio, second by Councilmember Veros coming up. And okay, what do? I got to do this here and okay, so then the decision is the council feels we should move forward with an appointment process rather than a special election for the reasons we all stated. And now let's talk more about the appointment process. There's some things we need to kind of nail down here that we've talked about. some things are as simple as, are we okay with a 400 word count? How long of interview do we want to do? Number of questions, number of candidates. We've got some recommendations from staff on the number of candidates, the timeline. Is it the right timeline? Is it, does it give us enough time to make a decision once all the applications are in? Things like that. So let's talk about some of those things, you know, and then get into some of the details in terms of, okay, do we want 3-minute opening statement, 2-minute closing statement? Do we, you know, how many questions? Are they preset questions and that sort of thing?
So I have one question regarding these interviews. Do we need to do, if we are doing individual, do we need to do that live stream?
That's the best practice with council meetings, to do it live streamed, and we can have candidates sit in a separate room. And we can also request that they do not access electronic devices. There's this thing with paper in it called a book. Maybe bring a book or something to read or study their notes. But we can ask them to honor not accessing electronic devices, so they don't have access to either live streaming or somebody text messaging questions ahead of time.
Sounds good. That way, just want to make sure that not while we are interviewing one candidate, the other candidate is not then watching on the streaming, right? So then it defeats the whole purpose.
And it will also be more of a request. I know we can have staff present, but I also don't want to put staff in the position of policing any activity. So it would be a please, you know, do not access, and they can be in a conference room and then you can call them in one at a time. And unfortunately, the last candidate would have to be sitting in the room the entire time, but we can do that at random.
Yeah, so let's nail this down. Do we want to do the individual kind of sequential type interview, one after another, or do we want to do kind of simultaneously in a forum where they're all there? I went through the forum process. I guess you call it a forum. Again, that was mainly dictated by the pandemic, I think. I'm not sure that was a preferred method for the council at the time, but that's what we did. We were all on the screen in a Zoom meeting, and it was, the council had, I believe it was initially 14 candidates had applied. The council had their initial meeting, whittled it down to the final 5. The final 5 of us all got on a Zoom call. We did like a 3-minute opening statement, and it was going to be a 2-minute close. But then each council member it was randomized. We took turns. Somebody was the first person, and then so you're on the spot right then. Everyone else is listening to your answer, and they're formulating their answer, maybe based on your input, maybe not. Maybe they're trying to distinguish themselves. Maybe they've got something they want to say on that issue. Maybe they're not really listening to you because you know, they do want to be different. But I will say that if you were number 1, you were in the hot seat. When you were number 5, you did have the benefit of listening to 4 answers before you, and you know, for whatever that was worth. And you wanted to change it, or in some cases, some people, I think, were even like, yeah, I agree with somebody before me. So it was, and I will say it was awkward. That was an awkward format. Having gone through it, it worked, but that's not how I've typically hired people in the past. I've usually done individual interviews myself. It worked. We got a solution and we moved forward. But I'd like to kind of hear any other discussion and kind of nail that down first. Do we want to do kind of the sequential, you know, one at a time, or a group type setting?
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Do you want to go first?
Let's say, let's take hypothetical situation where if we get 14 applications, let's say 14 applications, right? in that case, do we want to go through first round where we can reduce the number of applicants? Each of council member can pick the candidates from out of 14. Let's say each of us can vote for 2 members. That way you can pick 2, like 8 of them. Then we can go through the candidate forum or individual, whatever we decide now, and then go through the interview process. Is that okay?
Yeah, I think and that was a staff recommendation, right?
Right.
Your recommendation was up to 8. We can do whatever we want. We can make it 5. We can make it 10. We also have to respect or understand the fact that this is going to take some time to do this. If it's 30 to 45 minutes per person and there's, suggestion maybe of putting them in some room and bring a book and that sort of thing. Well, you're doing 45 minutes each for 8 people.
Right.
You're asking them a lot to kind of sit there.
Well,
I certainly agree. I think we need to, depending on the influx, a number of applications we receive, we may have to pare it down before we even get to the interview step. I do agree also that I think with Councilmember Rose and yourself, and I'm not sure of Councilmember Joinat, but I'm sure he'll let us know. I do agree. I think in individual interviews in series are the best way to go, just to make sure that we're giving people their sort of space and time to answer authentically and the way they can best answer in the way they want to. And we have a better sense to, and provide them to listen to them authentically and what they want to say.
Yeah, I agree. I think you will get a more authentic response individually. But Robert, anything on that?
No, I agree. Individual interviews.
I will say an alternative to the live stream as an option is we can record the interviews. We won't have to live stream them, but we can post them to the website afterwards for those to watch. But it is a public meeting, so the public is more than welcome to always attend and sit through the interviews live in person if they so choose. But otherwise, the live stream, that way we're not having candidates sit for hours at a time. But it is an option that we could consider as well, is recording them but not live streaming.
I like that option. So I think that-
Yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to understand what you said, because I'm trying to think of this in terms of kind of just transparency with the public and trust of government, things like that. When it's live, it's live. I mean, they're seeing what they're seeing. If it's a delay, then, there's some concern as to kind of what really happened, and this is just what they're showing us. I don't know how people think out there, but I just don't. I don't want them to think that sort of thing. Is my initial thought.
Yeah, but they can be in the room with us while we are interviewing.
Yeah,
the people who are like concerned, right? So if they can join us. It's
They
a
can-
public meeting, so they should be able to join us while we are interviewing.
It's similar to when we do our appointments for our commission. Is that what
Yeah.
you're saying? Yeah, so,
It would be recorded, video record. So
Then
it
posted
would-
later.
Yes.
oh, okay. Except
So
so
later
it-
that night or right after the interviews, we could post it.
Okay, so similar in that context, but video recorded, not just audio.
Can we delay post?
I believe we can, but under that option with the delayed post, you would still, want people in a room and asking them not to access electronic devices, because you could have a member of the public listening to the questions. Not that I would imagine any Santa Ramon resident would ever do this, or any candidate, but theoretically, you could have somebody sitting in the audience feeding questions to somebody. If they're on an electronic device. So if I'm sensing that's the concern of the council. We don't want any unfair advantages. You can't interview everybody fairly at once without tipping off questions. And so how do we do this in a manner where it's individual and you limit the possibility of somebody knowing the questions ahead of time? So even if we do delay post it, there could be somebody texting. I think there's no way, if you want to limit that as much as possible, of getting around having 8 candidates sitting in the room, and unfortunately that 8th candidate is sitting there for hours. If you have them coming in later, you just don't know. So it's of course, depending on the
Is it-
council direction.
I'm so sorry. I was just thinking almost like when we have these standardized tests, there's similar types of questions, but we can change the detail. That's how we randomize it so that even if someone did try to do that, they'd have to figure it out themselves on the spot.
Yeah, but I think we need to have same questions, right? Typically, when we do
You
interview.
can, but you can like,
Yeah.
say we ask them a budget question, we give them a number, you can change the number. It's still the same question. It's just a number. Do you see what I'm saying? Or that's what I'm talking about. There are some things that we can do to control that, but not a whole lot, of course. But there are
But-
some.
Yeah. Is it possible to have any restriction for the audience not to bring any electronic device?
We can request. There's no, I would not want to figure out a way to actively enforce that. It puts staff in an awkward position, but we could request that the audience not access, or the council can request that the audience not access electronic devices through the duration of the media or the meeting, but
So if they ignore the request, then they say, we still want to do that? Can mayor say that?
well, we can, yeah, we're starting to walk a little bit of tread a little bit of a line with what we can and can't enforce. It's a lot of it is a request of any participant to not do X, Y, and Z activity.
Yeah, I think, I mean, we're talking about selecting council members. I mean, I think they're all grown adults. I think we need to treat them as adults, as future council members, and give them kind of that respect. But I think we can ask them,
Right.
and then we trust them,
Mhm.
and we leave it to their own integrity as to whether they're going to comply with our request. I think we treat them with that kind of respect.
Yeah, I
So
guess.
it's just on our system that we expect them when
Well,
they
it's
want to
just-
be part of council, yeah.
Yeah. I think we just have to trust and hope that there's good faith in that ask and that they will follow that. And like I said, I mean, of course, granted here and there are smaller ways where we don't change the context of the question, but you could change maybe some of the data points and then hear what they have to say.
Yeah, I don't know that our questions are going to be that detailed that we can change around like. we
Just,
talked about.
yeah, I mean, I'd have to think about it, but there are some things that come to mind, but you know,
Imagine every question, if you have to keep changing for 8 people, then,
no, you'd have to prepare it ahead of time.
yeah.
But there are some things, but you know, I think just, you know, for now, I think just trusting that we make the ask and that they have, you know, that we have faith that they're gonna, you know, show up in good faith and follow the rules, is the best that we can do.
Okay. All right. So it sounds like we're leaning towards the sequential rather than the forum. Is that kind of what I'm getting here?
Individual, yeah.
Individual interviews
Individual
as opposed to all at one time.
And paring down if we have, if there's,
Okay. And well, let's talk about that.
I'm-
There was a recommended, is that agreement? Do I get head nods on
Yeah.
individual interviews?
Yeah.
individual interviews for sure.
Okay. And then for the, what was your question?
Paring down.
Oh, the paring down. So the staff recommended 2 dates in January,
Mhm.
right? Applications due on the 3rd by 11 o'clock, and then you will post an agenda
Mhm.
for a meeting I think you had on the 6th. Was it this?
Yeah, Monday the 6th.
Monday, the 6th. Okay, well, let's first discuss that. If we get them on the 3rd, which is a Friday,
Correct.
then we have the weekend to review however many applications it is. And is that enough time? By the 6th, we can meet in special meeting, and then that would be the date we'd whittle it down. That would not be the actual interviews. That's us. That's not us and the candidates. That would be the time for us to whittle down the pool of candidates into those that we want to actually see in person for in-person interviews. Is that enough time for everybody?
I have a question to answer that question.
Okay.
Is the process whittling it down? Let's say you have 40 applications. do you randomize and each council member gets 10? And then out of that 10, we pick 2?
All 40 would go to all.
All 40 would go to all. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Then, yeah, then Monday sounds good. I thought it would take longer because we'd have to randomize the.
So we
No,
need
I
to
think
rank
we- I think
choice,
we all need to.
rank
look at it
choice
and
those
then-
40. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and then we
Alright.
come to the meeting on the 6th and it's like, okay, who are your, up to 8, and we don't
Yes,
even know we're gonna
I
get 8
agree.
applicants. I mean, we could get 20, we could get 5, we could
Right.
get who knows how many.
Right.
But it would be who's your favorite 2? Who's your favorite 2? And we kind of go down the line. Is that what I'm hearing from your recommendation?
Yes, in the last process, there were quite a few of the same people to interview. So you may think 8's not enough, but you could have the same applicant for 3 of you. So that opens up space a little bit more to have additional candidates if you had someone on your wait list or, starred as a 3rd or 4th option.
And there are a couple options for selecting those candidates. I've witnessed councils going, okay, you pick one, you pick one, you pick one, you pick one, and then going back and forth until you get the 8. So, once somebody's picked, then you can't pick that person, and it basically forces a full field of 8. Another way that we were thinking about as staff that you could do it is each council member write down 2 names. We give it to the clerk compiles it, and then lets the council know, okay, we have 6, we have 7, we have 4, and then we announce who the people are. If the council says, yes, we think 4 is enough, 5's enough. That way, there's no perceived bias as to what council members picking what candidate for an interview. I've witnessed it I've watched some councils where, all 4 council members name the same person, and it gives the impression that that person is now in the pole position to be appointed because all 4 council members name the same person. So either way, either rotation, and that would ensure that you get a full 8, or we can do the ballot version where you each write down 2. We collect the votes and then say, okay, are you comfortable with going with 7, and then announce the 7 or 6 or
8
5,
or
or if we
whatever.
say only 2 and all 4 council members pick the same 2 people, then we might want to discuss doing it another way that night.
Mhm.
Well, I mean, my gut tells me that when we get the applications in, I don't know, but that it may be clearer than we think as to who the top
Mhm.
8 are, or 7 or 6 or 5 or whatever, depending upon how many we get. So, I mean, at least that's my experience, having gone through this with planning commission interviews, parks commission interviews, other committee interviews. Usually it just based on the application, it's somewhat clear who might be a better potential candidate than others to whittle it down. That's my thought. So I don't think it's gonna be a big problem for us, and I'd probably be inclined to, just kind of write down my 2, hand it to the clerk kind of thing, and then if we all pick the same 2, then maybe we need to expand it a little bit. Maybe we want a little bit broader audience. But I think let's again say there's 14 people. I think we could probably whittle it down pretty well, down to 8 or less.
I agree. I think that that's the best approach. It allows everyone here to have a voice in who they think are, somebody that should be considered. And as you mentioned, removing the bias of possible, and then going from there. And if we feel like, say for some reason, all 3, we pick the same people for some reason, now we only have 3 applicants. If we want, as you mentioned, if we want to add more to that list, now we have space to do that. And we can reconsider maybe doing another vote of 2 again, right?
Right,
Or
yeah,
something like
you
that,
would,
that
you
we
do
can
another
decide
vote
that we-
excluding the people that are already on the list,
Yeah.
and each council member would write down. We'd have to figure out a tie at that point, and there is a possibility that if you have 6 and then the council submits another vote and you end up with 3, then the question is, how do you, now are you doing 9? So we'll, It'll be a bit of sausage making, but we can deal with it. Some of these we might be overthinking,
Yeah.
but there are ways through all of this, and we can discuss that on the 6th.
Okay.
So I have one question. So I'll be traveling during these days. Is it possible to do hybrid call so I can join online?
I believe remote remote log for you are out both Monday and the Friday, the 6th and the 10th.
Through all those dates I'm out.
Okay. I'm not sure on the current remote participation rules since COVID.
Well, we have limited
Number of meetings.
The participation from the public comment perspective. We did that intentionally, last year, after the pandemic, and all the threats of Zoom bombing and things like that. But I don't believe, although I don't know, I don't believe we're not allowed to do a hybrid type thing, or at least have a candidate call in. We've done that with commission meeting decisions.
Right.
We've had people call in. We've done, video teleconference interviews with external people who weren't in town and things like that.
Yeah.
In the past, I don't see why we wouldn't be able to do that. But yeah.
Don't they have to give like the same similar, well, one of the questions is I don't know if that matters if they're in country or outside the country or in another state or not. I don't know if that matters. But I do know that is it that they have to post 72-hour notice outside of where they're going to be?
That was the rule prior,
It
Christina.
still defaults to the teleconferencing procedures because this is not an emergency situation, which was the new bill that passed in the last couple of years. So we would have to put your location on the agenda, as well as you would have to post an agenda in the location that you're be traveling to, and it would have to be accessible to the public.
Sure, I can publish. I'll be out of the country. Yeah.
Okay.
But I can share my location so that we can publish in agenda, right?
And I'll confirm with the city attorney's office as well as outside of the country location. But we would need a majority, so 3 council members would have to be present
They're
at the
there.
meeting for both meetings.
I hope you 3 are available.
Can I come?
well, where are you going?
Where you going?
Yeah.
Oh, this is my annual attendance to my parents.
No,
I
no.
have to show
I'm
them.
just saying, we might do a
Right.
quorum with you.
There you go. You're more than welcome. We can have council meeting from there.
Good cooking. I'd go.
Yeah.
Yeah, my comments, I guess, really were more about an applicant being external, but
Sure.
yeah, as a council member, we do have more restrictive rules.
What are your, like your travel window, if you don't mind me asking? Because I'm trying to see if maybe we could try to accommodate if possible, but I don't know what the travel window is.
He's from January 5th to January 19th.
5th to the 19th?
Yeah, all these dates.
Are you available on the 6th at all?
Oh, I can be available online.
Online
Okay.
is what he's saying.
Yeah.
But I was just curious, like what days he was traveling to see if there was like a little wiggle room. So you said 5th to the 19th, correct?
5th through 19th, yeah.
Okay.
As an option, you could push the timeline up. It's just allowing the public to apply.
Yeah, I think that's really the issue is we want to make sure the public, we're making this decision today. Applications are going to get pushed out right away. We want to give max opportunity for the public to put together, if it's a 400-word statement, whatever that is, or whatever the other criteria is you're going to have in the application. We want them to be able to, or think about it, confer with people, and this is the holiday season and they're traveling too potentially. So we want to be fair to the applicants. So we could push it up if there's anybody who wants to do it on New Year's Day or no way, it's not New Year's Day. It's
we could close it On December 29th, you could have, or December 27th, you could meet on December 30th and then conduct interviews on January 3rd. That's just an option.
Well, actually, I'm out of town on those days.
We can also, this timeline is designed to have a council member seated by the first meeting in January. We could look at a timeline that would be the second meeting in January if you wanted to make sure, because I do want to, caution if Councilmember Veros, if you're dialing in remotely, we will have to make sure that we have made the proper prayers to the technology gods that we're not going to, run into a Zoom issue or lag or anything that would limit your participation. We have been known, we put that on all of our agendas to not rely on Zoom because it can go out at any time. So that would be another option that we can look at the calendar basically now and see if maybe Monday the 20th would be the interview date and then the selection date. And then I don't know if we have any conflicts on the 21st, 22nd, or 23rd, but we
Talking
could.
January?
Yeah.
So
Well, I
January
thought we
20
had to make a decision by the 10th of January.
Oh, the 10th. Oh, I thought it was, right. Okay. Yep. Sorry. So no, we cannot push it out
Yeah.
for the next.
I mean, we are going right up until the last day.
Right. That is the last
on
day. I'm sorry.
Friday.
I forgot that it wasn't just a decision whether or not to go for an appointment, but it was a formal decision. Yeah. Then if not, if we went the route that I was just talking about, then it would be up to the governor because you would miss the deadline. So.
Yeah, and as
Yeah.
far as you're being out of town for the 14th, that's not, to me, that's not as much of an issue. That's really just the swearing in date.
14th, yeah, then no,
I mean,
yeah.
the selection's already done. That
Yeah.
would be more the swearing in
Mm-hmm.
for the individual. And we talk about vice mayor, we talk about liaison appointments and things like that, probably at that meeting too. So,
In regards to, and this question is for the assistant city attorney, the 30 days is governed by our municipal code.
Hmm.
Is there any leverage to expand it or go outside the 30 days? Or do we need to stay, just as a question, point of clarification?
We would have to, we'd have to revise the ordinance, which also takes time. I mean, if it's in the municipal code, then it's been ordained that way and you'd have to amend the ordinance
yeah, that's,
in order to
I don't
change that.
I don't see that happening. Okay, so back to then the question at hand, understanding now that you're traveling, but available if technology allows, to meet this timeline. Is this otherwise an acceptable timeline? And let me go back to the 10th. That is probably the very last day, if not, yeah, probably
It
the
is.
last day. Do we want to be waiting until the last day? Do we want to give ourselves any buffer to,
Yeah, does that include, because December has a 31st,
Mhm.
so it's still 10 to 10?
The issue with that week is in regards to live streaming, the Tuesday and Wednesday are out because of we have a planning commission meeting and a parks commission meeting that are both at 6 and 7 o'clock. Unless we conduct interviews during the daytime and not in the evening, that could be an option. Thursday is not, the council has prior commitments that afternoon as well, so it could be a daytime interview. And then Friday was the last evening available.
yeah, we've got the mayor's conference
Correct.
on Thursday. So we would have to do something before the mayor's conference.
And we typically hold these in the evening time. We could possibly try doing it during the daytime if we wanted to move them up on the Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. It's just availability of the candidates as well as council.
Okay. I'd say another consideration is also that if we make our decision on the 6th on who the final slate is, the final slate then needs, a couple days
Mm.
to do their
Mhm.
final preparation
Mhm.
with the knowledge that, no kidding, they're getting interviewed.
Mhm.
And so, we don't want to really do it the next day kind of thing. I don't think that would be fair to the candidates. So I'd say I'm okay with the timeline, I guess, as proposed. But we have little wiggle room if something happens on the 10th.
Another option would be to close it on the 2nd, select on the 3rd, and interview on the 6th. It's a little bit tighter of a timeline, but
Well, again, if we close on the 2nd and there's 20 candidates, we're going to be doing kind of first of all, are we available on the 2nd? Yeah, probably. But are we going to just give it a cursory look? This is a pretty important decision.
Mhm.
I'd rather have a little bit more time than just overnight, to whittle it down if we do have quite a few candidates. I'd rather have the full weekend personally.
Yeah, we don't know how many applications we're going to get, so that's kind of hard to assess, but I would say minimum, just to be safe, 72 hours is good, Um, but I'm saying on the 10th, we're still within that 30-day window, including because, does my question make sense? Because we had a December 31st,
yes,
it's 30 days still counted. Okay,
Day-
inclusive,
day
right?
one's today.
10 to 11.
Mhm.
Okay, got it. All right.
Okay, yeah, Robert?
Yeah, I have a question. So when the 10th comes and goes, we do the formal interviews. Does the decision have to be made on the 10th?
Yes.
Yeah.
Not on the 11th? Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So do you?
Okay, so it sounds like we are okay with the timeline as proposed here up on the screen. Am I getting that from everybody? You good with that, Robert?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so we've got a timeline now.
We have a
We-
timeline.
We're doing
uh,
individual interviews.
Individual interviews, a 400 word count statement,
Mhm.
select up to 8 candidates. We will be live streaming the meetings, including the interviews. And as far as the selection of the 8 candidates, it will be ballot style where you select and provide it to me, and we'll announce
Hmm.
and we'll go from there.
Right. Do we need to specify, city manager, do we need to specify that we each submit 2 at this juncture? Okay.
Well, at the time of selection, yes, we'll have the council submit a little ballot, as the clerk mentioned, like 2, and then the clerk will announce how many total.
Okay.
And if the council is okay with 6, then you can discuss.
The details
Right.
we can kind of flesh
Yep.
out then,
Mhm.
but for right now, I'm just saying, should we include in the motion as well that each council member will provide 2 recommendations
Mhm.
on their ballot?
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. I'm happy to move if you'd like, Mayor.
Well, I want to make sure we've covered some of the other things in
Sure.
terms of, and because I think we ought to nail it down tonight. I mean, in terms of the
Oh,
amount of
okay.
time we give them for opening and closing, because that ought to be in there. I think we ought to give them a heads up on that, or can we defer that till the next decision
You
day?
could defer it. The 45 minutes, I did include a 2-minute opening and closing, as well as 2 to 3 minutes per interview question with 2 questions per council member. So 45 minutes is, I think it got up to like 34 minutes, but with the buffer, if you run over with one candidate or the other, if they have questions at the end, the 45 minutes was to cover enough time.
Okay,
You can always go less or more. It was just kind of the timing that
yeah.
I calculated.
How long were we given at the forums in the past? Was it 2 or 3 minutes for the public?
3 minutes.
It was 3 minutes. Okay.
Yeah.
2 minutes for opening, and I believe 3 minutes
For
per
close-
question.
Closing.
Okay.
2 and 2 for opening and closing, correct?
Mhm.
Is that sufficient, you think?
I think that's
2 and
good.
2,
2 and 2 is good. I
2 and 2?
Yeah.
Okay,
2 minutes opening, 2 minutes closing.
okay.
Okay.
And then up to 45 minutes per candidate.
Mm-hmm.
And in terms of number of questions and things like that, it'll probably be up to 2 questions per council member, sort of in your timeline. Although I think we need to be prepared to come with additional questions in case some of us have the same questions. We don't want to run into that situation. So I'd say think through some additional questions for when the time comes.
Is
we
it,
can have-
is it, okay, sorry, is it okay for Steve to provide some sample questions?
Yes.
And we can provide sample questions. We can provide I believe the questions that were asked last time. We can get that to the council prior.
Are these questions in a topic formation where there's like 4 topics like safety, budget, and then there's
However you like to organize the questions.
Yeah.
Christina, if you can outline how we did the questions the last time.
Last time, each of you came up with 2 questions. You submitted it to us just to make sure that they weren't the same as each other. They weren't. They all were different. Each council member had their own area, whether it was budget, planning, any issues within the city, and we went from there. I do have the questions from last time as well as additional questions that were formulated.
Yeah, I think that the main thing is that we can't sit here, we can't really sit here and discuss what questions we're going to pick because, we can't do that in open. We have to do something in an open forum, whatever we do, right? And so if in an open forum, we discuss what questions we're going to pick, then all the candidates have access to those questions too. So I think we're going to have to come up with the questions on our own. And is that what you're saying? You did that last time the council members submitted their questions
Yes.
to you in advance, and then you kind of checked for consistency or conflict.
And they were all different.
Okay.
Yeah.
will
So
the
it's
public,
more,
go ahead.
sorry, it's like more like helping us to figure out the list of questions that you can pick from that way.
Yeah.
We can have our own questions, but then if you want to have something as for reference, that's where it will help us.
Yeah, a list
Yeah.
of standard questions.
Questions,
Yep,
that's all.
we have that.
It's not a must that you to use it. You can
Okay.
always come up with your own questions.
Right.
Okay. It's just that we're just not going to confer with one another on that. Okay. I'm good with that. Let's see, anything else? We talked about the timing. We talked about the number of candidates, the open, close, the length of the interview, the number of questions, the forced rank. Is that the direction we're going here?
Yeah, we
the
did
fourth
post
rank
rank last time
process.
and that really worked very well.
I think it helps us to build consensus once we start to, if we're having struggling between 2 people, it really provides, helps us narrow it, pare it down to like the top 2 contenders and make a decision if that happens to be the case.
So in doing that, just let's make sure we're all on the same sheet of music of what forced rank really means. And maybe Christina, you probably have the best experience with this, but as I understand it, this would be first interview occurs. Okay, it occurs. Now the second interview occurs at the end of the second interview. You're going to pick who you like better, the first guy or the second person. Okay, and then after the third interview, you're going to reorder those into first. You've already got your first and second, but based on that third interview, now where does that person stand, and so forth and so on, and you go through that process all the way through.
It will be very similar to how we conducted the ranking for the Climate Action Task Force, where you had the candidates, you rank them, and then you provided me with your ranking, and then we added it up to who is the.
Okay.
So in the end, we'll be giving only one ranks,
Yeah.
So it's not multiple, but only one rank choice for all the candidates. And then when it is tallied up, Christina will tally up and then based on the number.
Yeah, and the
Like
person with the lowest number is actually the highest ranked, right?
Or however we decide to do that. Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. All right. Are there any other decisions you need from us tonight before we kind of get into the motion business?
I don't think so. I think you answered all of them.
Okay. Who wants to either summarize that and make a motion, or
I can move
or
the
maybe the
motion.
clerk reads it back and then make a motion on what she said?
Just,
I'll make the motion. It will be individual interviews. The choice will be rank choice. Out of the list of the candidates, council is going to pick their choices of 2 candidates each. And this interview process will be live streamed. We expect the interview candidates to have an honor system, but not by not watching the streaming or not getting any help or support from outside. The word count is going to be 400 word count. And we prefer there is no endorsements within the candidate statements. What else?
I think you covered it. Did we miss anything? No? Okay.
And the timeline.
Oh, and the
Each-
timeline.
yeah. So the
confirmed as
timeline,
Laid out
yeah, could you please go?
as presented.
The timeline is the proposed process schedule, Friday, January 3rd. City Council applications are due online by 11 a.m. on Friday, January 3rd, 2025. And the second one is Monday, January 6, 2025. At a special meeting of the City Council, up to 8 applicants will be selected and invited to a formal interview by the City Council. On Friday, January 10th, 2025, formal interviews of applicants will be conducted by the City Council. This is the only interview date. All invited applicants must be available to attend during this public meeting. Following the interviews, the council will select a council member to fill the vacancy. And then Tuesday, January 14, 2025, the new council will be sworn in at the City Council meeting.
Okay. I'll second the motion.
Okay, motion, Councilmember Rose, second, Councilmember Rubio. Any further discussion? Okay, motion carries as moved, and we will then, I guess there's no other business tonight, is there? Okay, then we are adjourned until January 6th for a special meeting to decide from the list of candidates who turn in their applications for council member for District 2. Okay, meeting adjourned. Thank you.